MMA Oddsbreaker Frank Trigg. We're talking to Colton Smith this week. He's getting ready to fight Carlos Diego Ferreira coming up here on UFC Fight Night, June 28th in Texas. And my understanding is you're at Jackson's right now, and you're actually getting a full training camp for the first time?
Yes, being the United States Army active duty leader, I haven't really had a chance to get a full training camp in. My last fight, I got 12 days out of Jackson's, and that was the best I've gotten since The Ultimate Fighter. Luckily, the Army realizes, in order to compete at the highest level, I need to train at the highest level as well. It took some time, but now they approved it to where I can come out to Jackson, and I still take personal leave as well. But they're out here, they support me. So full 8 weeks at Jackson. I've been here for about 6 weeks now, and it's been a pretty awesome experience.
When you say the military supports you, but you still have to take personal leave, so are they really supporting you if they're making you take personal time off to go to camp?
They're supporting me because they allow me to chase my dreams as not only a non-commissioned officer in the Army and take care of my family on the Army side, but as well as chase my dreams as an athlete and one day be a world champion.
Well, here's part of the problem, though. Say you become on the way to becoming a world champion. Once you're a world champion, you'll fight maybe twice a year. That's kind of what the average is for all the champs. But on your way to get there, you're going to have to fight sometimes 3-4 times a year. Are they going to give you that much personal leave to get 6 months worth of train camping? Because that's really what we're looking at. You're looking at, if you fight 3 times a year, it's about 6 months you're in camp. How much personal leave can you take in a year?
You generally save about 30 days of personal leave in the military a year, but luckily I had about 72 days or something like that saved up, and so I've been coming out here, and I've also done some permissive TDYs, what they call it, where you don't actually get charged leave, and doing some stuff at Fort Bliss, which is right down the road, as well as the Air Force Base, and trying to get in with them so I can do some military training there, help them with their hand-to-hand program while I'm training at Jackson as well. So there's some avenues and some routes that I can still get back to the military while I'm in training camp and not get charged personal leave. So it's a work in progress, and it's a kind of a new thing for the military. I am the very first UFC fighter ever to be on active duty, and vice versa. So first one in the UFC on active duty as well.
To me, this is all brand new. Everyone in my family has done federal service or is doing federal service currently. I'm the only one that's not. Nor never has. And it's very difficult for me to understand that, you have a full-time job defending our country, then you still have a full-time job as a fighter. I talk to a lot of fighters that have a part-time job, as a mechanic or as a plumber, as a contractor. You have a full-time job, defending us. And so it's you go from one spot to another, and it's very different. The tactics and the you talked about hand-to-hand combat down at Fort Bliss, which is right down the street from where you're at. It's still completely different than what you're actually going to use in the UFC. How do you make that change? Say on Tuesday, you're at Jackson Winklejohn's, sparring full go, and then you have to go in and train on Wednesday. How do you make that switch?
So luckily the Army Combative Program has really evolved. Our hand-to-hand program has evolved, doing a lot of jiu-jitsu-based stuff, a lot of Muay Thai stuff, and then obviously we're in full kit, full gear and stuff like that, so that's the difference. And there's also training with weapons and stuff like that. So yeah, you got to flip the switch, and I need to flip techniques a lot of times. The techniques that'll work in the cage obviously won't work with a weapon or with full kit on, in a combat scenario. So I think I've learned to flip that switch. I've been a combative instructor for quite a few years now in the military, and also been fighting part-time as well. And now this is the first time I've really called myself like a full-time fighter, while I'm also a full-time soldier and leader in the military. But the switches are hard to flip. Luckily, the Army shares the same sentiment as a lot of the MMA stuff as far as jiu-jitsu goes, Muay Thai goes, using the post-frame hook same way you do in Muay Thai to throw strikes, but instead to pull your weapon out and utilize that.
Well, let's figure out what weapons you're going to use against Carlos Diego Ferreira coming up here on June 28th at UFC Fight Night. Now you're in a full training camp. You've got the expertise of arguably one of the best camps in MMA today, down there at Winklejohn, Jackson. What have they said is going to happen? What do you think that they looked at Carlos's tapes, that they try to figure stuff out? What do they say Carlos is going to try to do to you? What do you think Carlos is going to try to make happen once you guys are inside that cage?
So Carlos does really well at a couple things, and he has a lot of holes in his game, but he does really well at setting the pace of the fight, making sure that guys get lulled into his pace of the fight. He takes breaks in the cage, and I don't care if he hears this or not. I mean, he takes breaks psychologically. I think he's a weak person mentally, but he allows guys allowing him to set the pace of the fight, rest in the cage, and they both take breaks, and that's just not my style, And luckily, being with Greg Jackson and Mike Winkeljohn, not only have I learned a lot of techniques and skill sets, but I've also kind of re-cemented the fact that, what I'm good at and having them tell me and training with the best, my training partners I train with day in and day out, fellow UFC fighters as well. It's pretty awesome to see, myself turn into a full mixed martial artist, not just a guy that has decent cardio and he pushes forward hard. So, I mean, it's, we see a lot of holes in Carlos's game. We see a lot of also, he's obviously a very dangerous fighter. There's a reason why he's 9-0 and undefeated, and he does a really good job against different kind of fighters. But same token, he definitely has holes in his game that we're looking to exploit. And psychologically, I mean, I'm just a lot mentally tougher than he is, and I know that's not everything, but that's quite a bit of the fight game, is being mentally present during the fight, as well as pushing the pace in the fight to break somebody.
And for you, you're kind of, you don't even want to say it, but your back's kind of against the wall with 2 losses back to back in the UFC. You lost to Chelsea and then Whitaker before that. Has there been that conversation sitting down with Jackson and going, look, this is a not necessarily a do or die, because we've seen guys get 4 or 5 losses in the UFC, obviously, and stay on board with their contract. But has there been a conversation with Jackson or with Winkeljohn where they've said, look, we've got to really buckle down, really pay attention to make sure that you get a victory in this next one? Is this also one of the reasons why the Army finally got behind you full force and said, look, we got to send you off to full training camp because it's just not working?
It's kind of implied when it comes to this fight, when you're coming off 2 losses, and the shitty thing is that, at points in both those fights I was winning, and it's just that's what the most disheartening thing is when you lose to somebody like my last fight, that that you're or you feel, your coaches feel you're definitely the better mixed martial artist out there, but you get a W or an L on your record, and that sucks, and it's something you got to live with, but you can use it for a positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, and I think I've really learned from it, and just it's more about being a veteran in the cage and take my licks and keep going and driving on, and Greg Jackson and Winkeljohn, we have discussed my future as far as mixed martial arts and as far as in the UFC and everything, and just stick to the game plan. That's the biggest thing. No pressure, not a have to win situation. No pressure. Just go out there, push my game plan, which I've never really had a real true game plan. So push my game plan, and I'll be victorious on June 28th in San Antonio.
How difficult was that going in? Because, obviously being in the military, everything is about a game plan. You know exactly what's going to happen and what you're supposed to do. And, of course, in live action battles, chaos ensues and you've got to make adjustments. But there's always a game plan. And then going into a fight, for the UFC, you never really had a game plan. Like, how difficult was it going into fights, not really knowing, not really practicing and knowing which way you're going to go and how you're going to make things happen?
Yeah, I didn't. I think a lot of that was that I didn't have the time, to train. I trained, it's pretty funny, up until The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I was training Tuesdays and Thursdays at 1700, 5 p.m. until 7:30 p.m., and that was only my guaranteed training days, and that's not if we were out in the field or on a mission at the White House or the Pentagon when I was in the Honor Guard. And so that's all I trained, and I made it on The Ultimate Fighter, and then I won the show, and I think I won the show. A lot of that's attributed to being able to train every single day and just focus on just mixed martial arts, and that's why I won the show. And then now I'm back to that, where I can train every day, and I'm at a real training camp, and I have a real game plan. I think the biggest change was, actually game planning for an opponent, and that's, it's pretty wild to see it work. I mean, everybody should have a game plan, just like in the military. We're going to have a game plan. We're going to have a battle plan. If it doesn't work, then obviously we go back to what we know, and that's repetition that we did before we went, deploy, went down range, or whatever field exercise we're doing. So no different in MMA, I think. There's been a long time where I was kind of closed-minded, and I said, there's no science to fighting. Just go out there and fight. There is a science to fighting, and I'll be the first one to say I was wrong. And, you definitely need a game plan. And obviously if the game plan doesn't work, then you go to what you know. And if that's just bite down your mouthpiece and send some punches down range and look for the takedown, that's what you got to do. But I really see this game plan working. I mean, I've seen all 9 of his fights, and you know, I'm very confident when he, not a false confidence, but I'm very confident when it comes to this fight. And hindsight's 20/20. If I would have had this in my last couple of fights, who knows? Those times when I knocked down Robert Whitaker and those times when I had Chies's back, maybe I could have secured the finish. But everything's a learning lesson. I'm really young in this sport. I've only been fighting for a few years and never full time. So my mileage in the sport is definitely low at this point, and I'm excited to win this fight, get past this fight, and then look on the future.
That's Colton Smith getting ready to fight Carlos Diego Ferreira on June 28th, UFC Fight Night in San Antonio, Texas. Colton, thanks for coming on here. I appreciate it. I know you just got off the mat, so I'll let you get in the shower and get some food in you. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
Thank you very much, Frank. I appreciate it, brother, and I'm glad to be on the show.